Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, 10 Personal Cybersecurity Tips for 2021, brought to you by KLR Wealth Management and our affiliate technology company, Envision Technology Advisors. My name is Ashley Brown, the Senior Marketing Manager at KLR. Welcome. Just a few quick housekeeping items that I wanted to mention. We will be recording today's webinar and sending a link in our follow-up email. And we received the questions you submitted when registering. Todd will be covering those today. But if you have any additional questions, please use the question panel to submit them. And for those of you who are familiar with KLR Wealth, you'll recognize Perry Ann Aptaker. Welcome, Perry.
Thank you.
Perry is the Managing Director of KLR Wealth Management and will be providing a quick intro and then handing things off to Todd. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. Good morning.
Todd is the CEO of Envision Technology Advisors, and he coaches business owners and individuals like yourselves on all things technology. Todd is well versed in cybersecurity, and as someone who's had the opportunity to hear him speak before, he is engaging and enthusiastic. So today should not only be informative, but it should be fun. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Perry.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're presenting this webinar today to help you understand the nature of the cyber risk you face as individuals and how you can protect yourself from these threats. High net worth individuals are acutely exposed to cyber attacks and financial fraud. They tend to hold large amounts of sensitive and confidential information, and because of their reputations as successful people, even things that hold little or no monetary value can be exploited by criminals that cause significant harm. These include reputational harm. My mother used to tell me it takes years to build a good reputation, but only seconds to lose it. You are vulnerable to these attacks literally through every internet-connected device in your home, whether that is a thermostat, a smart light bulb, a doorbell, a refrigerator, your laptop, or even your kids' toys. Personal cyber risk is not simply a technology issue, it is more of a behavioral issue. Your behavior is a bigger predictor of how exposed you are to cyber risk than any individual piece of technology. Todd's presentation will give you tips for things you can personally do to protect yourself, and you do not even need to be a techno geek to shield yourself from bad actors. Todd, take it away.
Okie dokie. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to all you brave folks that decided that 10 o'clock in the morning was the perfect time to learn about cybersecurity and personal protection. Yeah, this is a super exciting topic if you're me. It's painfully dull if you're anybody else. So I'm going to do my very best to try and make this as fun and interesting as I can. But, you know, a couple of things. First of all, it was mentioned just a little while ago that we have the question panel off to the other side there. I'd like you guys to use that, please, as we go. This is your time. I'm here for you. I'm here to answer whatever questions you have. I've got lots of information to give you, but I want you to feel free to just type questions right into that panel, just like this one. The IRS contacted me on Facebook today. I need to give them all my personal information. Should I just make it easy and post it on my feed for them? The obvious answer to that being no, let's not do that. But this is where I'm going to be monitoring it. I know that both Ashley and Perry are keeping an eye on it too, and if I miss one, they'll make sure to get my attention. So a couple of thoughts on our topic. First of all, if I sit through even one more webinar about personal digital security where somebody tells me not to click on links I don't recognize, I think I might jump off a building. This is about as important a topic as anything could ever be. And I feel like people in my industry have a habit of treating everybody else like they're dumb. The reality here is that we live in a time where we have invited the entire world into our homes via the internet. And the internet gave us a tremendous amount of power. It's amazingly enabling. But we invited everybody into our homes. And then we said, well, that's not good enough. What about, social media? Is there a way that I can post my own life out in the public for everybody to see so that we can stay connected? Because we are a social bunch of critters running around on this planet, and we like interacting with other people. We like being connected. And so social media, of course, changed the way that we all live. But with all of the power that we've gained from the internet, with all of the capability and the ease with which our lives has changed, I mean, I think, you know, most people today, when they go to somewhere new, they show up at a restaurant or they go to a family member's home, one of the first things they do is connect to the Wi-Fi, because it's become a central part of our lives. With all of that, the level of risk that we've assumed has increased. And I don't think it's reasonable for us as a people to say, well, you know, I'm going to avail myself of all that the internet has to offer. I'm going to make myself exposed and connected on social media, but I'm also going to silo myself and say, okay, well, there are techies and there are non-techies, and I'm a non-techie. I'm just going to do my social media and my email and shop on Amazon and not think about the rest of it. And I think my industry has a tendency to treat people that way. So we're not going to do that today. I'm going to get into some topics today that are a little bit complex, but I'm going to do it by avoiding using a bunch of techno babble. I'm going to try not to get too deep into the technical weeds with you, but at the same time, I want to empower you. Empowered users are safe users. So that's my goal for today. If I miss the mark anywhere, don't hesitate to use the chat, use the questions, ask me anything you want to know. Okay, so let's talk about the way that security has always worked. And throughout the thing here, I'm probably going to be notating on my device as we go. So some thoughts on our topic and the way security has always functioned. Ooh, there we go. So first of all, when we think about security and passwords, it's always been a very siloed thing. And I'll apologize in advance for my handwriting. It was either be a doctor or be an IT guy. I settled on IT. So we have websites that we visit. Maybe they're Amazon or Hulu or Netflix or any of those things, right? So website number 1, 2, and 3. In the past, the way that we've managed passwords and credentials has always been to just simply create a username and a password for each of these individual sites. So we've got a username 1 and username 2, username 3, password 1, password 2, and password 3. Each one of these sites manage the credential themselves. So this password belongs to this site. Now, the reality of that is that most of us use the same username and password for everything. Once upon a time, we all used to create custom usernames, and then usernames became email addresses, and now we all largely use the same credential across the board. The problem with this model is that we aren't dealing with 3 websites. I think if you guys really think about it, most of you are managing 30 or 40 passwords in your daily life, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today. The problem is that when we are compromised or when there is risk, so we have a hacker that gains access to our credential one way or the other. When that occurs, if we want to secure ourselves, we have to go change website 1, go change website 2, go change website 3. But what about website 27 that none of us thought of, right? Something we haven't used in a while, but that the hacker has access to. Maybe by changing the credential, we've blocked them on 1, 2, and 3, but we forgot number 27. And so this is where we become vulnerable and exposed, right? The catch with the traditional model of password management is that once we're compromised, A, it takes a very long time to reset everything. B, the odds that we're going to remember absolutely everything are pretty slim. So that brings me to our first topic, centralizing your credentialing. There are some great providers on the internet, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. I put them kind of in my preferred order. You know, Apple should be on this list as well, although Apple IDs are used less and less by multi-factor sites or single sign-on sites, I should say. There's some great providers out there. A lot of us have Facebook accounts. A lot of us have Google accounts. A lot of us already have a Microsoft account. If you've got a Google account and you go to set up, for example, a new banking site or a new Hulu account, you'll see a lot of times when you go to log into those sites, you know, create a username and password or sign in with your existing credential provider. It's not been a conversation that I've heard a lot, but a personal strategy for managing your security is to pick the identity provider you're using most and try and centralize on that. The advantage of having that happen is we talked about this model back here earlier, where we've got this hacker and we've got all these disparate sites. Imagine for a moment that the hacker compromised our credential, but that we were right here at the underneath there was an identity provider. Let's say that this is Google, okay? I mentioned earlier that it can take a long time to change passwords. Well, if I'm using Google as my sign-in for all of these websites, then I change my password in one place and it instantly changes it everywhere. So by centralizing on an ID provider, we can kind of defeat that time it takes to resolve a hack or a suspected hack by just having a place that we can go to make a change. Now, I know some of you in your head are saying, but Todd, wait a minute. If I have one identity provider and I'm using it for everything, doesn't that mean that if I get my credentials stolen, that they're stealing it across everything that I've got? Isn't that what you were thinking, Perry? I'm sure that's right. You could just nod. If it wasn't, you can just nod.
I
Anyway,
was
no one's
thinking,
gonna know.
it's funny because I've always seen that and said, oh, that's a trick. I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people, I've heard that lots of times, but the sign in with a centralized ID provider is actually a valid thing on many, many websites. So personally, I primarily am a Microsoft guy. I really like my Microsoft credentials, and I'm going to show you why. But before that, I was largely using my Google account. And so, I sign into most things with Google, and I still personally have a lot of things tied to my Google account, and I'm transitioning them to Microsoft now. But the reason that we are not going to worry about that issue of, okay, well, if I use one ID provider and it doesn't affect everybody is because of number 2, multi-factor authentication. All right, so let's talk about what multi-factor authentication is. Multi-factor authentication, you guys will all recognize it, is when you go to access a website, you put in something that you know, a username and password, and then it sends a message to your cell phone that you need to swipe or enter a PIN number, right? So this is actually part of a modern approach to security called, well, I shouldn't say that. It is part of a modern approach to security. Corporate security, commercial security, the things that we would use at KLR or at Envision, tend to be a few steps ahead of personal security tools. In the modern world, in the corporate environment, we talk about something called zero trust security. And zero trust security looks at identity in terms of what do you know, what do you have, and what do you do? Okay, so if I want to prove that Perry is Perry, I can ask her something that only she would know, right? I mean, maybe Perry and I once went to a networking event together, and I was ordering a beverage, and the woman who was serving it to me tripped and it spilled all over me, and I can say, hey, Perry, if you really are you, what happened that time we were at that networking event? And she'd be able to answer me. Well, that's a username and password. That's something you know. The idea is that you're proving who you are by providing information that only you would have. But that's not always enough, because maybe somebody else saw that incident, or maybe Perry, the real Perry, has told that story before, or maybe somebody compromised your password. So multi-factor is now adding a second step, a multiple factor to authentication. And it's saying, okay, you've given me something that only you would know, but what if somebody else stole that? You know what? I'm going to send something to a device that only you would own. So I'm going to send you something that you either need to swipe on your phone, or a PIN number that's going to come to your phone that you'll re-enter. And so now I'm elevating the level of trust I have that Perry is really Perry, because she's told me something only she would know. She's interacted with a device that only she would own or have on her person. The third thing is, what is something you would do, right? So when we talk about corporate security, there are tools and technologies now that say, well, we know that Perry logs into the network every day at 9:30 in the morning. And wouldn't that be the dream, Perry?
5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, 5:36. We know, we're pretending that we have work-life balance. We know that Perry logs in every day at 9:30 in the morning. We know that Perry accesses the same 15 folders most days. We know the GPS location that she typically logs in from if she's not in the office, because we know where she lives, right? We see those things as patterns. So let's say that Perry gives us something she knows. She gives us the right username and password. She interacts with something that she owns, her phone. But then we see that her behavior is very different than the Perry that we know. She's signing in from Central Asia. She's trying to access folders that she doesn't have permissions to. She's doing all kinds of things in the network that don't make sense. Well, now we lose confidence in her identity. And that's sort of at the heart of zero trust. What we want to do as individuals is try and apply as much of that to ourselves as we can. So we deploy multi-factor everywhere we can. Our social media accounts, Amazon.com, banking sites, credit card sites, everything you see on that list, I don't need to read it to you. But by turning on that feature in all of the accounts and the tools that you use, we get to the point where now we can have centralized credentialing. We can have a central identity provider. We can say, okay, I'm going to use Google, I'm going to use Microsoft, I'm going to use Facebook, whatever that is. And everywhere that I get the opportunity, instead of creating a separate account, I'm going to link one of my existing accounts to it. So now when I go to log in, it's going to ask me for a credential that I'm managing centrally, and which, if compromised, I can change in one place and instantly lock down everything that uses it. And I'm going to secure myself with multi-factor so that if that credential were compromised or somebody attempted to use it without my knowledge, my phone is going to buzz and it's going to say, hey, is this you? Are you trying to do this? Right? So right away, our level of security is significantly elevated just by doing these two simple things. All right. That brings us up to leveling up our password management. This is not a conversation about password complexity. I'm going to trust that you guys are all way smarter than that. You've heard it a million times, don't set your daughter's name as your password. Fair enough. What I'm talking about is two different things. Password managers versus manual management and handling account recovery questions. Okay. With the questions that were submitted to us leading into this event, one of the common trends was, how do I manage my passwords? We are all living in a time when we have 20, 30, 40 credentials. Well, I'm going to give you some thoughts on this because I get asked a lot, hey, you're an IT professional, you've been doing it for 22 years. How do you do it, Todd? Right? And I'll tell you about that too. But let me say this. We're living at a transitional moment right now, all of us, where the technology is moving faster than any of us can keep up with it. I do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I live in the industry, and there are things that catch me by surprise on a near daily basis because it's just moving that quickly. When you are in transition, there's always a certain amount of chaos that occurs. But the transition that's happening in the security world right now is the transition away from passwords. We are going to end up at a point where we're not really using usernames and passwords anymore. That's sort of the oldest trope in our industry. I think immediately after the first computer was built, somebody said, oh, we ought to put a password on it. So it's an old way of handling security, and we're actively working away from it. In fact, Microsoft, and you'll recognize this from your cell phones, how many of you actually need to put in a password or a PIN number to your cell, or versus just looking at it and it unlocks because it scanned over 1,000 points and made a three-dimensional map of your face and said, okay, you are you, because there's nobody that can match the exact biopatterns of your physical structure, right? We're moving away from passwords as an industry. And so, 5 years from now, this is going to be a very different webinar. But today, we're still in the middle ground of things transitioning. So what we end up with is lots and lots of passwords. We can reduce that by following the first two steps, centralizing our credentials and using multi-factor authentication. Doesn't mean you're not still going to have a lot to manage. So the question is, hey, what about things like LastPass? And I think I've got this right here. There you go. So LastPass is a password management platform where you can go to the website that you see up here, lastpass.com, and click on how it works, and it'll explain that you put in, you basically put in a browser extension, you create a master password, and then all of your other credentials get stored underneath it. And as you go to websites, you can literally just click the button and it'll populate the credential and off you go. there's a big question mark in a lot of people's minds about using something like LastPass, because they say, well, okay, if you're a hacker, what do you want to hack? Do you want to go after Perry's one Hulu account, or would you rather go and attack LastPass and get everybody's every account, right? So I know IT professionals who, actively say, oh, I'll never use a LastPass or a password manager like that. LastPass's credential manager has never actually been compromised. They did actually have a data leakage at one point. You can Google it and find out more about it, but the credential manager was not compromised. Here's the catch, right? Everything in IT and everything in our lives is about mitigating risk. There's no guarantee when you get in your car that you're not going to be in a car accident. And so we learned to drive defensively when we first learned to drive. And you know the people who did that well and the ones who didn't, because the ones who didn't are the ones that are in the parking lot constantly rear-ending the light pole because they're not using their mirrors, right? So I don't want you guys to be the person in the car that's rear-ending the light pole. I want you guys to be driving defensively digitally. And so I think this is about mitigating risk. In my own family, my parents, my wife, my friends, I recommend that they use LastPass. The reason that I do that, or using a similar password manager, I particularly like LastPass. LastPass's credential store is deeply encrypted. LastPass's master credential prevents even the people from LastPass from being able to access your credentials. And it's never been compromised. Conversely, I deal every day with people who thought they could do it better themselves and ended up with their identities compromised because, like I said, they didn't centralize their identity. They didn't use MFA. They stored their information in a Excel file or in a text document, or, like one family member that I encountered at one point that I discovered was on a sheet of paper in their wallet. There was literally 50 credentials on a piece of paper in their wallet. They thought they could do it better themselves. They missed one little thing and everything was compromised as a result. So I think this is about risk mitigation. Nothing is 100%, but I think you're pretty safe with a tool like LastPass, and it'll make your life easier.
Todd, are there any of these that you wouldn't recommend?
Ooh, good one. Yeah, there are, and actually the one that pops to mind went out of business. But when I go and look for credential managers, what I'm looking for is a encrypted credential store. I'm looking for a master recovery password, and I'm looking for a tool that is cross-platform. If they fit those three categories, the other thing that I do is I quickly Google them to look and see whether or not they've been breached. As long as those things are clear, then I feel fairly comfortable with them. All right, let me see. I just want to take a look. There was a question that was popped up here.
There's a few of them. You've got a few questions in here.
Yeah, let me just, before we go too much further. Ooh, boy, I love this. Look at all these. 2 weeks after a Chase credit card hack, I got a phone call from Chase. They wanted to make sure the illegitimate charge I'd reported was still illegitimate. How do I ask Chase to verify their identity? Good question. All right, so the way that I handle those things is if I get a proactive reach out from a third party asking me to validate something, I'm actually going to, I'm going to take this up one little level here. When in my office, we have a standing rule, and the standing rule at Envision is if you get a query from me that, first of all, I'm very clear with everybody, I will never ask you for sensitive information, social security numbers, financial data, account numbers via email or Microsoft Teams or any other way. If I need that information from you, I'm going to call you directly, or I'm going to come into your office and we'll talk. So we've got a standing rule around that. But one of the things that we tell our people is if you ever get a request from a customer asking for information, never reply to the email. And the same applies when somebody calls me and reaches out with these things. If somebody calls me, reaches out and says, hi, I'm calling to validate these charges. I need to verify your identity. I will typically hang up the phone. Then I will go and find the number for the bank or institution that called me, and I will call them and then ask to be connected to the fraud department and handle it that way. Because that way I know that I'm getting to the actual agency that's involved, right? Similarly, there's a type of attack called a man in the middle. And part of the way that works is by impersonating one end or both ends of the conversation, actually. So you get an email that looks like it's legitimate, you get a phone call that feels legitimate. It's actually a bad actor that's trying to compromise your information by not replying, by not responding in that moment, taking yourself out of that interaction and creating a new channel of communication that you initiated directly to the known entity. You can defeat that kind of attack, right? So that's what I do with those. Another question, a couple of them actually. Don't sites get access to all of your contacts if you sign in with Google or Facebook? So yes and no. That's a sort of a two-sided question, or two-sided answer. Typically, when you sign in, it depends on what you're actually doing. If you're signing into a phone service or you're signing into an email platform and you're going to do that with, Google or Facebook or something like that, where part of the service they're providing is communications, then there will probably be a disclosure telling you that they will be accessing your contact information. By default, particularly with Google, Google does not provide any information to a third party during authentication. This is also true of Microsoft, without express consent. So it is not, there's no world in which you can use your Google ID to connect to an organization, and then Google will provide all of your contacts to that organization without you having actually been notified and consenting to that. And if the site fails to provide it, Google will actually send you an alert. So it's a pretty safe way to communicate, or safe way to authenticate. Regarding multi-factor authentication, should I be concerned when the number is sent to my Apple phone by text that it also shows up on my MacBook Pro? No, that's actually an Apple feature. That part of what they do, Apple is really interested in trying to blend the world between your phone and your device, which is why if you have an iPad and somebody FaceTimes you on your phone, you can pick it up on your iPad. They have synchronicity with their text messaging and a few other services, so I wouldn't be too stressed about that. All right. One more question here, and then we'll move on. Philip, the answer to your question, so McAfee's Password Manager, I don't have any big stressors about McAfee's Password Manager. It's been around for a long time. I don't think that's ever actually been breached, although we could look into it pretty easily. That's a pretty well-known one. And I think that's pretty much all of them. There's one question in here that I don't understand, but I think we're going to get to some things that may clear it up. Okay, let's keep going. Whew, you guys are great. What a great bunch of questions. I love it. All right, so we've talked about password managers versus manual management. Let's talk about handling account recovery questions. So when we do account recovery questions, what I'm talking about here is what was your first elementary school? What was your first vehicle? What was the name of your first pet? Those kinds of things. There are really two things you could do here that would improve your security. If you talk to most security professionals and you said the words security by obscurity, they're going to frown at you and shake their head and be like, that is a terrible way to manage your security. And they're right, because the idea is that by making something hard to find that it won't be compromised, that's not really a fair thing. But in combination with several other tactics like the ones we've been discussing, everything you do that makes it harder for a hacker elevates your level of security. There is, with account recovery questions, at one point in time, I had basically traded account recovery questions with somebody that I knew very well. A very close friend and I talked about this many years ago, and we knew each other extremely well. We went to school together, but he was in one high school, I was in the other, but we were in a lot of programs together. I know his birthday, he knows mine. We were both born in the same town. So we had done some things and said, okay, I'll tell you what, for some of the password recovery credentials, you use mine, I'll use yours. I have other people that I know that deliberately will, for example, what year did you attend high school? They'll add 5, and that's part of in their head, that's their approach, is every time they get asked the password recovery credentials, they use the same thing every time, but it's not the actual real answers to the questions. And the reason for that, it revolves around how identity compromise happens, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. All right, so number 4 is control your devices. Patching of your devices, usage, location, and anti-malware are all things that need to be secured. If you don't know how to do it, then this is a flag for you to be saying, okay, I need to make some phone calls. Family usage levels, how much are people using their devices and what are they using them for, especially if you've got young children in the house. I am a fan. Apple does this very well. I like that aspect of their platform. I am a PC guy primarily, not because I don't like Apple. I actually put Apple in all my family's hands, but this is my Microsoft account. One thing that people don't realize is that Microsoft offers a Microsoft 365 family plan. So if I go in and look at my family options in this account, from in here, I have my family members, there's my wife. I could do things in here like managing Xbox time, setting screen time limits and gaming limits, and setting restrictions to prevent children from buying things without them knowing that they're doing it. I can set budgets for stuff. I can define how the security will work across the organization that I'm running in my personal account, and it's going to credential me here. Or I can do things like setting device policies so that I can see every device that we own, whether it is patched, whether it is secured, whether that device has been, if it's been lost, I can lock it remotely, I can find the device. I can do all the same things that you would do in Apple, but you do it with the Microsoft platform. So if you're not an Apple user and you're not using their technologies for this, this is a really good place for you to look, is invest in the 365 family plan. It also, by the way, gives you all the Microsoft Office services that you would want, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all that stuff across every device in the house, including all your tablets and smartphones and all that good stuff. So whether it's Apple, whether or not it's Microsoft, these are things you need to be attending to. I realize you're not IT people. However, you cannot afford to live in a bubble of ignorance. You're smarter than that. I know you are. And IT people don't like to talk to end users about this stuff because they don't trust that end users can do it right, but I know better. I know you guys can. So make sure your devices are patched, otherwise you're opening the door. Control your data. I'm going to show you something that I bet you've never seen before. Have you ever heard the term personal vault? This is actually specifically a Microsoft technology. As far as I know, there is no direct analog in the Apple ecosystem, but I do think, and this is kind of important, I've never been a guy that's like, anti-Apple pro PC or vice versa. I'm a woodworker when I'm not being a computer guy, and one of the very first things that you learn when you get into woodworking is that everything is doable if you have the right tool for the right job. When I am thinking about data and I'm thinking about personal security, there's a range of devices and technologies that I use. This personal vault, what I'm going to actually show you a live demo of this real quick. So this is my Google OneDrive right here, okay? This OneDrive, you'll see I have a personal vault here. It's grayed out. If I double click on it, what it's doing right now is it is asking me to approve a sign-in request. And so it's saying, hey, I want to make sure that you are who you say you are. And so it's giving me that something that you have. So this is my actual cell phone. And you can see my screens right here. If I swipe down, I can go in and choose, there's my mom sending me a text message. I can pick out my authenticator. Then it's going to ask me to approve my sign-in request. So I've done that. And there it goes. Now it's signing me in. Now what it's going to do in the background is it's going to unlock my personal vault. When it unlocks, I'll be able to access it. And you'll notice I have a social security card that I have recorded in there. Why do I have it there? Because I'm not afraid at all that this is ever going to be compromised. And the reason I'm not afraid of that is because this personal vault automatically relocks itself after 5 minutes of inactivity. It is encrypted with an encryption credential that I designed. Even Microsoft can't access it. It is the single most secured place for me to store information. So Personal Vault is a Microsoft technology. There are similar things in some other platforms, but whatever you would settle on, pick out a file storage provider for the cloud. Get rid of storing things on your local computer. More local computers are compromised than cloud services by a long shot, You know, nothing is 100%, but again, this is about mitigating risk. You're going to reduce your risk by settling on a cloud storage provider, Apple Files, Google Files, Microsoft. I would stay in that family of tier 1 providers. I'm not a huge fan of the jungle drives and the more niche cloud storage providers. Right now, and I'm sure it's the same at Apple, but at Microsoft, there are more than 3,500 cybersecurity professionals actively guarding the file systems at Microsoft. There's no way on earth I can do it better than them, and there's no way on earth that some little niche cloud storage provider that's doing it for 60 cents cheaper than Microsoft is going to be able to do a better job. So I would stay inside that, Apple Microsoft world. Okay, so before we move on, a couple of things. Great question. How do you safely dispose of devices? A lot of IT companies, including Envision, run community e-waste recycling programs where we will literally pull the hard drives out of devices that need to be disposed and have them securely shredded on site. There's the big old machine that comes to Envision, and it shreds the drives right there and provides certificate of destruction. Find a provider that will do that. If you can't, you can actually search on security waste disposal, and there are companies out there that you can bring your device to them, and they will do that for you. And the second one was around Personal Vault is that a Microsoft specific technology? Yes, it is. Although I'm sure there are equivalencies in some other platforms. I'm just not familiar with what they are. Okay, let's talk about decentralizing financial accounts. Tip number 6. I think we're doing pretty good here timing wise. These are the things that I do. I have set up an account just for incidental online spending. So here's what I mean by that. I am not worried about my Amazon account. That's not the one I'm concerned about. My Amazon account is multi-factor. Every time it's used, I know it's being used. I get notices. I've got lots of things that are tracking my Amazon world. What I'm talking about is, I'm an IT guy. I need a piece of software, and there's one that's made that does what I needed to do, a utility. And that utility is, out. I look at it and it's like some third-party software company that's in a country that offshore somewhere. I have no idea who they are. That's an incidental one time. I got to buy this utility. People who buy from Etsy, where sometimes with Etsy you get redirected to the crafter's own site and you can buy directly from them. Well, do I know them? Do I know this site? Do I know its security? I actually have a debit card that I set up with my primary banking institution. I keep a small volume of cash in that account. It's a few $100s. And then the little incidental purchases that I need to make, I use that account, because if I'm gonna have something compromised, I'd rather it not be my primary account where I've got checks that are pending that may, for my mortgage, that if I have to close this account because it gets compromised, now I've got to redo all of that stuff. It's easier for me to have just one little account off to the side that only ever has a few $100s in it for those one-off things where I'm going to a site I don't really know very well.
Craig, would a credit card serve the same purpose?
Look at you, jumping right to the end of the story. I love it. Yes, it does. And so there are services from Capital One. They have a service called Eno, and Citi does virtual cards, where what happens is you sign up for their credit card, and then you go into Eno and issue a one-time credit card number that is different from your primary credit card number for use on, questionable websites when you need to make purchases. Citi, you can actually issue additional card numbers off of, if you sign up for their service, you can issue additional card numbers. And, if you had, for example, your kid wants to, buy tokens in Minecraft or something, you can use that other card that's got a very low limit that you define, give them that information so you're not exposing your primary credit card. So virtual credit card numbers are a great way to handle it. These didn't exist when I first started doing this, and so I'm still using the account that I had set up. And it's literally just a debit account, and I transfer funds from my primary account to it. It's easy enough, right? I also have a recurring spend account that's got a limit on it. I use ally.com for that. Ally is an online bank. You can get credit cards from them, debit cards from them. I do it with a debit card. You could easily do it with a credit card, but all of my subscriptions, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all of my Microsoft 365 family account, anything that's recurring that I'm saying this is going to have a monthly fee, I'm approving it, I write them down to the same spending account. And I don't use that account for anything else. It doesn't get used for incidental purchases online. It's not used to process my Amazon transactions. Why? Because if you guys really start thinking about it, you're going to realize you've got a substantial number these days of recurring monthly bills that you get from online providers. If the account that you're using is compromised and you have to close or change it, the logistical headache in your life of now having to go and fix every one of those services is significant. Doesn't mean that by having a recurring account that account won't ever get compromised, but if the only place it's being used is on your recurring services, the odds of it are lower. So in the time that I've been doing this, which has been about 8 years now, 9 years since I set that up, my own personal account has been compromised. I live a life online. I'm an IT guy. My personal account's been compromised. My recurring spend account has never been compromised. So I think that's a great tool for you. Okay, number 7, build out a contact doppelganger. This is a thing that a lot of IT people do. I don't know why we don't talk to everybody in the world about it, but you should do these things. I have an email address that is not my Microsoft address. I have a Google email address that I use anytime I'm doing those one-off transactions. So when I go to that website with a company that I've never seen or didn't know, I use a specific account number for the purchase, and when it asks me for an email address, I give it my Gmail shopping email address. It's not my primary account. I don't use it for credentialing. It's used just for contacts with companies that I don't really know or recognize. Also, if you don't know what plus addressing is, so if I had an account that was I don't know, let's see, my last name, Knapp Shopping, and it was at gmail.com, right? So let's say I set up a dedicated account. Google supports plus addressing. What that means is anytime you have Knapp Shopping, you can put a plus sign and anything you want after it. So I can sign up with Knapp Shopping plus Etsy at gmail.com, and that will successfully deliver to my Knapp Shopping at gmail.com account. I don't have to register in advance. Anything after the plus sign works. Google supports plus addressing. Why do I do that? Because it helps me know where something might have been compromised. So when I go to a site that I've never seen before, I go to buy from, Wally's House of Dog Toys, and it's wallysdogtoys.com. When I go to put in the email address, I will put in Knapp Shopping plus Wally's at gmail.com. That's not a real email address. I just made it up, but I use my shopping email address plus Wally's at gmail.com. So then what happens is later on, when I start getting spam or I start getting requests from a third party, at the from address is my shopping plus Wally's at Gmail, I know where that data leakage has happened. And I also can block it with a mail filtering rule really easily. So there's a huge advantage to doing that. The other thing is I have a virtual phone number. I never put my cell phone number into a contact form. I have a virtual phone number, and I have more than one. Recently, like literally like a month ago, we sold my wife's Mini, and we decided we're going to go buy a new Mini. I don't know about you guys, car shopping is not my favorite thing in the world to do. You go in, you visit these people, they want your contact information. They always ask you for a cell phone number. It's hard to get them to not to not require it. And what happens is they start calling you incessantly forever after that. You get a million phone calls from the car dealers. It's not a problem. I have a virtual phone number that I set up specifically to go car shopping. That's the one we give all of them. When they call me, it caller IDs from that number, because that's how the virtual service works. Instead of when they call me, instead of it coming from their number, it comes from my virtual number to me. So what it tells me is it literally rings on my phone as car dealership, and I know, and I can just ignore it. And part of the reason I do it that way is you've heard people say to you, if you want to reduce the amount of spam calling you get and the number of phishing attacks you get, don't answer numbers you don't recognize. Well, maybe I do want to talk to the car dealers. I'm not going to recognize their number. That's not going to happen. So I don't want to start picking up every call that comes to my phone for fear of getting on too many spam lists. So it's better for me to have a virtual phone number, assign it to that particular use case, and then when they call me, I'm good. Okay. Google Voice provides this service for free. Freedom Voice, you'll pay a small charge. I think I actually have their website up here for you. Yeah, there it is. So if I wanted to get a phone number, and I do have a Freedom Voice number as well that I use for a different purpose, I can say, okay, what area code do I want the phone number in? And you do a search, you pick out the number that you want, and then you go forward and asks you, how do you want it to work? Do you want a 400-minute number, a 1,200-minute number, or an unlimited number? And you can see virtual attendants forward to any phone, unlimited voicemail boxes, mobile apps with unlimited texting. All these things are built into the service. So I actually have one. I have a place in Florida. You need to, in order for the gate to work, it has to forward to a phone number. So I set up a virtual phone number that is in that area code, but that when it dials, it automatically forwards back to my cell, and it rings as gate because it comes in with the caller ID that I set up. And so I know exactly what's going on. So getting control over your communication and contacts is another way that you can secure and improve your digital posture. Okay, let's see, there's another questioner come in. Does the amount need to be the same every month for Ally? It does not. A variable is okay. And that's it, we're up to date. Okay, cool. Number 8, hire a digital bodyguard. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is there are a couple of services, Identity Force, LifeLock. I actually prefer Identity Force over LifeLock, and not for any reason other than I have an ethics problem with LifeLock. They do provide a good service. I've used them before. I've recommended them to customers before. They lost a lawsuit around unethical advertising practices, and things like that matter a lot to me. So it's just personal philosophy. I don't give them my money personally, but they do provide a good service. What these companies will do is these companies will provide monitoring for your credit accounts, for your bank accounts. They'll monitor the dark web for you to see if your personal information has gone out onto the web. And they provide alerts to you if they see unusual activity, hits on your credit rating, somebody's trying to open a new car loan in your name, or your credentials been compromised and it ended up out on the internet. The way that they look for that is they know your email addresses. Email addresses are tied to credentials. So you can do it yourself. You can lock down your credit accounts with the 3 credit providers directly. You can also get into the habit of looking at haveibeenpwned.com. That is a site that is, I thought I had it up, but maybe not. We'll just do it on the fly because that's what we do. There we go. Have I been pwned? I clearly went and looked for it this morning. All right, so you can plug in an email address or a phone number here. So let's try mine. Let's look at my work email, todd.knapp@envisionsuccess.net. Do a search. 3 data breaches. Okay, so now we know that my account and the credential attached to it has been lost in 3 different data breaches. So companies that I had signed up for things for had a leak. You know, you can look at permutations because I have a bunch of aliases that work against my account. Well, that one's got 6 data breaches. And let's see this one. Imagine how much fun it is to be me. 3 more data breaches. Look at that. So right there, we've identified 12 breaches that have exposed my contact information. So happens I know all of those. They're all very old. It was actually because for a while when I was using siloed credentials before I centralized on a password manager, before I set up multi-factor authentication, I started having I had my identity stolen 3 times. I'm an IT guy. You know, I mean, I'm out on the internet everywhere. So,
Hey,
so
Todd,
it was important.
Todd,
Yeah.
when you just logged in, I think you had PWNED, and that only says PWND.
Oh, all right. I apologize. There's an E here. All right. I will fix this before we distribute the slides to everyone. Just a typo. So yeah, if you search, you'll find it very easily. And there's a couple of other sites like that. The good news is that, again, primary identity providers like Microsoft, Google, and Apple are starting to do this for you. If you have a modern Apple device, you may have gotten a message at some point that said your password has been compromised. They're using the same data set to do that. And Google is now doing the same thing. Google Chrome web browser does it for you. All right. Number 9, raise awareness. First of all, you need to talk in your family about the risks associated with identity theft and threat. We talk about all kinds of other things. You teach your kids, you talk with family members, you know, if your spouse and you are going into the city, you know, you talk about, you know, do we keep our wallet in our back pocket or in our front pocket? What are the things that we can do? Let's not have, you know, our cash sitting in the outside pocket of a backpack we're wearing. Common sense things that we do to protect ourselves in real life. You teach your family members to bring things in at night and put them in the garage where they'll be safe so that nobody comes onto the property and takes their bike. You have discussions about regular security with the family all the time. You need to have a plan as a family about how you're going to protect yourself digitally. Identity theft is a long con. People think of identity theft as I've got your password and 20 minutes later I've got your identity. That is not the case. That it is about data gathering. So what happens is people use social media, among other things, to learn stuff about you. You go on to a Facebook account and you start to see what kind of cars they're interested in, where do they live roughly. You can get information about where they work. People expose information about themselves. You can figure out who they're married to, who their family members are. And one of the more common things that we're starting to see happening is family phishing, particularly with high net worth individuals. Hackers identify a target and they are systematic about gathering data. They identify a target, they scan the, by the way, you know, the way they're going to do that, they're going to go out to the dark web, they're going to get a list of potential targets, hundreds and thousands of them, high net worth individuals. Then they're going to start going through and saying, okay, who's had recent data breaches, right? So look for a breach recently where your information has ended up out there in the world. Then they're going to find the one that the most information is available about on the dark web, and that's the individual they're going to go target. And now they're going to go and find their social media accounts and they're going to figure out who the kids are, who the spouses are. Then they'll go find their social media accounts and they'll start learning about them. So, you know, what elementary school does your child attend? You know, that's a common password reset question. Well, guess what? Your kid posted pictures of themselves in front of the sign at their elementary school. That information's available, right? The other thing that they will do is something called vishing. Vishing speaks specifically to voicemail phishing, but it also includes fake phone calls, people that are calling you or your spouse or child on the phone. And one of the more egregious ones recently was a customer of mine whose child got a phone call from someone who said that they were the police and said I'm calling because I'm trying to remember the exact circumstances, but it was something along the lines of I'm calling because there's been a report that your mom is in danger. It was something like that. And the police officer started asking questions about, you know, I need to make sure that you are who I think you are. Can you give me your address? Can you give me, and they started asking information. Well, this kid didn't know any better. They thought it was the police. And so they started answering questions. And that's scary, but that is what these people will do. They are ruthless. So you need to have these discussions as a family about how you guys are going to protect yourselves. And finally, have a written plan. I did this with my parents, and it's been used 3 times since I did it. The written plan should be business card sized and fit in your wallet. 3 to 5 steps you're going to take if you think you've been compromised. If you make a mistake and you answer the call you shouldn't have answered, or answered the question, you hang up the phone and go, oh no, then what are you going to do, right? In that moment when you're stressed and you're feeling anxiety because you've made a mistake, you're likely to make other mistakes. So do your future self a favor. Prioritize the highest risk areas of your digital identity and put those at the top of the list. So, I'll show you an example. This is what the one that I prepared for my father looks like. I put in a bunch of fake information here, but he's got an account with a local bank up in Vermont. So the first thing on there is call your bank, put a temporary freeze on your accounts, and there's the phone number for the bank, Dad. Notify Identity Force, because we use Identity Force as a family. Then change your Microsoft password, go to this website to do it. Call Capital One, and here's the phone number. And these are all just fake things. And then the last thing on the list is, hey, give me a call. Call me and let me know what happened, right? You're going to have somebody in the family that you count on or rely on when things like this occur. They're not your first call, they're probably your last, because time counts when you think you've been compromised. Okay. Please, please, please do not on your little 3.5 by 2 inch business card wallet list include the account numbers. If you do that, you've missed the point of this webinar. Don't put the account numbers on there. All right, so let's wrap it up. We got 3 minutes left. Here's the list: centralizing credentialing, deploying multi-factor, all these things that you can see here. What are the things that are most important? If you were going to leave here today and do a couple of things, what would you do? Number one, the first thing I would tell you to do is go and sign up with a digital bodyguard service. And let me just get my coloring back here, because all my ink was white previously. This is probably the first thing I would tell you to do. It's the thing you can do fastest. It's the thing that, instantly after you do it, you're getting notices. Second, I would do these 2 things. I would get your identity centralized, and I would deploy multi-factor everywhere. This one around password management is a good idea. I do think that in terms of protection, the third thing I would do, and the reason I didn't put them in this order in the deck, is you'll notice in the deck I was kind of walking you through the logical evolution from passwords all the way through to written plan. These are the things I would do first. Then, some of these things like this, the digital doppelganger, do I have a second email address, a virtual phone number? Those are things I do. I think they're great tools. I get that not everybody's going to want to do that. So, the other thing I would do that would be very high on my list, and I would do it along with number 1, is I would have that conversation with the family. So, just a couple of things thinking about order of operations. You hang up from this call and you say, wow, I don't agree with everything he said, but there were a couple of points in there that matter to me. These are the ones I would focus on. Okay, if you found the conversation interesting today, there are a couple of other webinars coming up, and I'll leave this slide on the screen for a minute, but we're also going to distribute the deck to you guys. I do see a question here that says, if I see a data breach listed on, have I been pwned? Where do I find out what has been breached? Actually, I didn't click on it, but there's a button below that says view breaches, and it'll show you the list of where those attacks occurred. And it also helps you know where to reset your passwords. I speak on all kinds of technology topics: personal technology, digital security, corporate technology, emerging technology, and innovation. We're doing a bunch of Microsoft Teams webinars that are around. Most of you are probably familiar with the Teams and Zoom evolution since the pandemic began. We're going to teach people how to do those things. And then these are data analytics and data-driven culture webinars. And this is just the stuff coming up in the near future. You can go and check out our website for more. And you can also check out our YouTube channel, Transform Everything. And so with that, I want to take a minute to thank KLR for including me in this, and Perry, thank you so much for pitching out the idea for the topic. It was actually, I started out thinking, well, this will be easy to do. And the more I did it, I thought, well, this is really fun. There's a bunch of cool stuff in here. So I really enjoyed this, and I hope you guys all got a lot out of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. And thank you, Perry. I know I learned something new today, and I hope everyone else on the call did too. That pretty much wraps up the presentation. And as Todd mentioned, we'll be sending a link to a copy of the PowerPoint and a recording of the webinar out this afternoon. So save the date for our KLR Wealth next webinar, which will be on June 22nd. It will be a quarterly update as we have done in the past. So we'll be sending out an email about that soon. And as always, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're here to help. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great day. Thank you again, Todd and Perry.
Thanks, Todd.
You're welcome, Perry. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.